welcome back to episode 3 of Together in Ministry. This is my lovely wife, Catherine, and I am Carlos Garduño. I have the distinct pleasure of being a senior pastor in New Mexico. And if you're ever in the Albuquerque area, I would love to host you, be my guest at Vista Grande Church in Tijeras, just past the actual canyon between Albuquerque and Edgewood. And we would love to have you. Bible study and also for worship, 9:15 for the former and 10:30 for the latter. And we also have family activities throughout the week for Bible groups, and then also family nights on Wednesday. So we would love to have you. Give us a try. Of course, if you are in the area and do not have a church home. Now, coming back to the series, we're going to talk about protecting our marriage. Something that I think is very important for you as a man who's looking into the pastorate, for you as a woman who is supporting a man that may be in ministry or looking into ministry to discern his calling. You need to protect your marriage. And the reason being is this. The first unit created by God is the family, not even government, nothing else. Right as creation happens, he creates the family. Adam created first, the woman created out of the man, and he gives them the stewardship over creation. Have children, multiply, right? Subdue creation, meaning steward it well. And then we're told that they are to manage the garden, cultivate the plants and take care of the animals, etc. So that is the first church ever designed, and it was designed by the Lord. After that comes community, and that's how we have now today churches all throughout the world, and so that is important. So the first question that I would like us to consider, my love, is this. When ministry competes with family, how do we know when ministry is overtaking our marriage?
I think we know because, or at least I can only speak for myself, because it may be different for you. But I think I know when it seems like ministry is starting to become too much of a priority of our marriage, when I start to feel lonely.
Okay.
And I know that's something we had talked about. And initially, early on, when we were still kind of figuring out ministry and we did tend to prioritize it, I felt lonely a lot. And part of it had to do with our opposite schedules. Part of it had to do with me being gone a lot at work. Plus, you were very involved in the church. So there were a lot of factors that went into that. I mean, we often said sometimes we felt like passing ships because we were just on so many different schedules. And then as kids came, it got a lot harder because they needed attention. They were little, all these things happening. But I think what I noticed that ministry is starting to become a thing is when I start to feel sort of lonely in the sense that I'm not alone, like you're not present, but like we're missing that connection for whatever reason. Either you're gone a lot or ministry is draining both of us. Maybe it's a really busy season and we're not taking that time to connect because of whatever reason. We're maybe over dedicating our time or we're kind of just running until we drop. And so we're missing those moments of sort of getting back on track. And so that's oftentimes one way I know that it's probably starting to become a priority. Another way is we'll tend to fight more.
Yeah.
We'll tend to snip at each other more often or get irritated by things or defensive about things because usually it's not as much the other person as much as it is we don't feel like we're either being heard or there's other stressors going on that are adding to that. And so then that one extra thing we just seem to get really upset about. And that's when things are kind of out of balance or something's not being prioritized right.
So, yeah, totally agree. I think for me in our dynamic as a couple in ministry, I know that ministry is trying to encroach upon us when I see myself having less and less time, even though I'm dedicating already the work day to the office and to be available to people. Even things begin to pile up onto my free days, typically Friday, Saturday. And then what I also see happen is I know that this is happening when I am exhausted. And that affects how I behave at home. It affects a number of things. So that's how I know, okay, it's time to rein it in. One of the things we've learned on a pastoral level is prioritize time better and to say no to programs and things that are just desires but not needs. And
Right.
so, for example, we are not a program driven church. We are a relationship driven church. So we want to have a good relationship between God and us, but then have a good relationship with our neighbors so that whatever we do, it's more intentional so that we can then build relationships. Are we good at it? Yes, I think so. Are we perfect at it? No.
Right.
But we're still learning to do that. And so that's what I see happening when ministry is attempting to overtake our marriage, which a word of caution to all the men out there,
Mhm.
it happens naturally.
Yes.
Hence intentionality needs to take place
Right.
in your life individually, as a married couple, as a family, and then that also bleeds out as intentionality takes place in church life. Like I tell the church here regularly, we are not a program driven church. We want to be an intentional body of disciples who focuses on reaching others with the gospel and discipling them as well in a natural manner. So the next question says, have we ever prioritized church growth over home health? I don't know that it's church growth, but I know we have prioritized church overall
Right.
over our own home health.
I would agree with that. We've never really been that focused on church growth as far as numbers or things like that, but just church life, church ministry, the things happening in church,
Right.
have definitely had their moments in the sun more than our home health have. And it's sort of been in phases, like ebbs and flows. And there were periods where, it hasn't been that difficult and it was easy to prioritize, and other times where we really struggled or we just flat out failed. And we really did let it become more important, and we neglected things that we should have been focusing on more, or didn't really know how to balance it better. Even if we understood, I think there were times where we also understood, hey, this is kind of getting out of balance, but we were struggling for the tools to sort of rebalance things in that period. And that was also kind of a tension inducing spot, because we're like, well, we know this is too much, but what are we supposed to do about it without letting responsibilities fail or dropping this here or whatever? And so that took some navigating for us for a little while. I would say the temptation is still there even now. I think it never goes away, especially for people like us who are generally task oriented, want to get things done. We're both type A people. And so I think that temptation will probably always exist for us in different phases and seasons of our life. So it comes and goes, but I think we're better about recognizing it quicker. And I think we're also better about discussing it when it comes up.
Right. And I think for us, especially in light of the experience we've had so far, sharing life together, the biggest thing that has continued to be a blessing is this: having the right leadership, the right people around us, because then we are able to say this with a not in a sarcastic way or in a half-hearted way, but we can say it genuinely. We go do the work, we leave the consequences to God. And so what I mean by that is we are not constantly laboring because the results of ministry come from our toil. We trust that we are doing what we're supposed to do. We trust that we have done our best. We always try to put our best foot forward, and we let God deal with the consequence. So if that means more people come to church, great. That means the same amount of people come to church, great. If that means some people may go because of whatever issue they have, we'll pray for you, we'll miss you, but we have to be okay with it, because at the end of the day, ministry, if the success of a church rests upon my shoulders, I'm trying to take the place of God Almighty, and that is not okay. However, if I trust that I'm being diligent with my time, I'm being diligent with my relationships, resources, etc., then I won't have to worry about prioritizing one over the other. And God will honor that because we see that in scripture. All right. So the next one is, what are some warning signs that let us know that things are out of whack? There's an imbalance.
Right. I think one of the biggest ones is we just generally fight more. We'll disagree more.
Right.
It may not be screaming matches, right? We generally try to avoid those, but it'll just be oftentimes we get offended a lot easier. We get more defensive really fast. Usually that shows that we're just not connecting on a level. And so we're really not hearing the other person. And then it's leading to this disagreement or misunderstanding that kind of blows out of proportion. I notice that we tend to be more impatient with each other or even with the kids because we're not connecting there. We're not being as present at home. We're so busy running around doing other things. So we're missing some of those things at home. And then, of course, it bleeds out into all of that. But I'd say probably the biggest one is we tend to snip at each other more. Um, and usually over really, really silly things because we're not really hearing the other person. I think we feel the stress of maybe not connecting and all these other things going on. And so any disagreement we have ends up feeling like a really big attack. And so then we just kind of over escalate it.
I think the biggest thing that can give us hope in dealing with imbalance is it's always easy to hit pause to things. And even if it's just for a moment during even during a busy season in ministry and life, you can just take 15 minutes, recalibrate, try to get your head on straight. It's even better because, for example, here, one of the things that the church told us through the elders, you have a month off throughout the year, 4 weeks paid vacation, use it. You need to use it. They are looking out for us. And so that helps with the imbalance situation because we know, number one, the preaching of the word is going to go without any problem.
Right.
The men are good and they know their stuff. Number two, there's people who can take the burden. We don't have to be encumbered by a number of tasks that other people are trained to do. And three, we have people who understand that we are not superhumans. We are answering the call to service, but we don't have all the answers.
Right.
So that definitely helps with the sense of imbalance, which at the beginning was very much present. Now, not so much. So here comes the other one. And I think we've already started going into it. What practical resets have helped us? What are some of the things that have helped you?
I think what really helped us was, there was that period of time after a lot of really bad church hurt, and we were still healing and things where we really just weren't on the same page. And there
Right,
came a point where we really recognized it. And we're like, we've got to do something. Like, we can't keep doing this. Obviously, what we're trying is not working, right? We need
right,
some tools. And so I think that the family life conference that we went to was really just this massive step in the right direction, and it definitely didn't fix everything overnight. We still did a lot of hard work at home, but it gave us some uninterrupted time to deal with some issues that we really need to deal with. And it forced us to really learn how to re-listen to each other. It was something we were really good at when we were first together and first married, but we forgot how to do well. And a lot had changed in our marriage and how we functioned and dynamics. And so um, I think that really helped us sort of refocus and say, look, you're not always going to like I'm not always going to like what you say, but I still have to learn to listen and evaluate it and not just dismiss it because it offends me. That's not good communication. And to be able to admit when I was wrong. And, I obviously didn't always do things right, and be able to say, you know what, I'm sorry I messed up. I haven't been there in these ways, or things that I've said have been hurtful, and I need to apologize for those things, right? So I think that's been helpful. And then we've been intentional to try to continue those things and say, you know, when we can feel ourselves, we recognize better when we can feel ourselves getting upset. Hey, we're obviously not listening. We're obviously needing a minute. Let's take a mini break and then come back and really try to hear the other person and respect the space if the person needs it.
right. So I think for me, yes, the family live weekend to remember has been good, and we'll have a link to a group if you want to select that. It'll be in the description for this video. So just go click on it, and you can join the group, and you can look at it. They have multiple hundreds of conferences throughout the U.S. and find the nearest one. We recommend it. It's wonderful. And you can also find other groups maybe close to you where you can do that. So those have been wonderful. The other one that has been wonderful is being able to have breaks even during the week where
Hmm.
we can, when we get home, we can talk. Dinner, we try to be more intentional now, also just be there. Sometimes it's a mess because the boys sometimes get crazy, but just being there together as a family, which is a blessing in itself. And then I like the fact that now we're trying to tell the boys, hey, you go to bed, you need to go to bed unless you're sick or something, which has happened here lately. But usually that's time for us where we can either watch a show, talk, read something, just
Right.
unwind. And those things have been very helpful, I think, to help us reset when we're dealing with miscommunication, anger, resentment, whatever. And it allows us just to be more in tune to one another, which again helps us to be better equipped to be a married couple in ministry outside of the home. All right, so we're going to talk about now conflict in a ministry marriage. And so the first question is this: Do we fight differently because we are in ministry? Or are we just like any other almost Jerry Springer like couple?
I don't know that we're Jerry Springer like, because, there's no other baby mamas around here. So I think we can avoid that one. But
No.
I think we definitely argue probably somewhat typical, but I do think there are some key differences in how we fight.
Okay, what are some of those?
Well, I think we were worse early on because we were both too judgy and intellectual for our own good. And we would hold each other to sometimes ridiculous standards, and we wouldn't even talk about the expectations all the time. And so it was kind of silly. And so we would get really miffed at each other, right? But then there was also this, well, we have to keep the peace in the house. And so it was just this really weird dynamic that we had. I will say, since you went through chaplaincy training, that was slightly annoying because you would like do therapy on me in the middle of our argument, and it was a little irritating because you were right. And it was and it was frustrating because I was trying to win an argument or get my point across, and you're like, well, and this, and from your past. I'm like, no, that has nothing to do with it right now, with vacuuming the floor or whatever the argument was about. The towels by the sink, I don't know. All kinds of dumb things we fought about. But you would do this like therapy thing with it, which was great because you were working through stuff. But I wasn't working through it at the same time, so you kept using it on me.
The Jedi mind trick, and it worked.
So that was kind of annoying. But I think now, especially after the conferences, I think we do still have our fights, but I think we have learned how to just listen to each other better and to be more gracious and to be more humble when we've messed up. Even if we're a little stubborn and don't admit it right away, I think both of us, we come to this realization of, hey, and I mean, there are times when, being a woman, I get a little psycho, and we recognize this, but I have learned also, I have become more introspective and learned when I'm not feeling right. And I will come and tell you, hey, I can tell my hormones a little wonky this week. I'm so sorry. I'm being crazy today. Help me out, right? And you'll help and be like, hey, chill out. Let me help with these things, right? But I think we fight, but I think we've grown in our fighting and learn to recognize things about ourselves faster, not just beat the same old bush.
That's right. So number one, we do want to fight fair. And that's something that we've learned by going to family life events. Number one. Number two, we have grown in the way we fight. You're right. I think there's this Goldilocks idea of learning how to fight. So it's not about dumping all your anger out for everything that you have pent up issues with, but also it's not about we never fight and we're quiet as church mice when it comes to disagreement, which we have that dynamic in both of our families where keep it no, and that's not healthy either. It's okay to fight, but it's learning how to fight fair, one issue at a time, not bringing up the past, focusing on a solution that is not you trying to fix someone else, but fixing yourself. And also being mindful that it's okay to face conflict because conflict happens in life, but knowing that we have a choice to not make conflict the end all, rather make it a tool that can help our marriage. In other words, we don't fight just because we are ticked off at each other. We're fighting because we are not seeing eye to eye, and sometimes that's the only way that it can be resolved, but it never comes to blows. It never comes to disrespecting one another, and it's always trying to hear one another out. So I think that's the biggest difference that you would have with someone who's not in ministry, because it happens even in the church. Statistically speaking, there's as much divorce in the church as it is outside, and a lot of that number of factors, but one of them is the lack of communication and the lack of healthy conflict resolution. And so I think that's been the biggest tool to help us overcome how we argue and fight in marriage.
Well, and I think one thing that also is different, and this isn't strictly ministry, but it's incredibly important because we are in ministry, is there's no backdoor exit. We are married, and it will be that way until we die. And so there's not an exit plan if we don't get along. So it's sort of imperative for us to not be crazy and end up in a mental institution that we
or know how to fight well.
Right. That we figure this out anyway, because we're not planning on getting divorced. We're not looking at it, and it would also disqualify you from your calling. And so it adds that extra level of, look, we're sticking this out for the long haul. So we can either be just awful, or we can work to figure it out and find a resolution and enjoy marriage.
Which is something that I want to make sure it's clear for everyone who may be watching is during our engagement time and even leading up to it, we were talking about values and priorities and goals for life. And one of the things that we both agreed on is going into this, there's no divorce. That means I'm going to work at not being a jerk and not being abusive and violent. That means for you, you're going to work at things that honor me as your husband without dishonoring our relationship or putting yourself out and presenting yourself in a way that's dishonoring to Christ and to me. And that was a common understanding. It was a conversation that we came into knowing that we weren't going to go for the easy way out. Because a lot of the things with marriage is, I don't know that people address a situation, and some people may say, yeah, but you never know what may happen in the future. And I will simply say this: if God can choose to love a people who are unfaithful to Him and be faithful because of who He is, then I can choose to be loving and faithful, and as can you, because of who God is making you to be in relationship to our marriage. So I think we need to be mindful that divorce is not an option, not because we want to be better than anyone, but because we're holding on to the promise and the ministry of Christ in us that says, you've made a lifelong commitment, so we're going to work on it because we see the value in what God has created. How do we disagree without damaging unity?
I think this is where, when we were first married, even when we were engaged, a lot of things we talked about. And of course, life has changed. So some of those things have changed, but we had like major expectations of, these are the majors we agree on. These are our non-compromisable things, right? And some of those have adjusted here and there because, of course, when you're young and nothing's happened to you, right? And it's early in marriage, you have rose-colored glasses on. And as life has gone on, we face situations that we didn't have to worry about then.
And we found out that we're not perfect.
Right. And I think that comes with, okay, these are these major things that we must be unified on to go forward. And if we're not unified, how do we seek that resolution? And usually that's a lot of prayer and study and scripture.
And talking.
And then there are minor things where it's, we may not agree. So one of us is giving, one of us is compromising.
Right. Or both.
Or both. Maybe we only get half our way, both of us, for the sake of moving through this and not having a long-standing conflict. But I think at the core of it, the unity is still the same because we went into it with the mentality of, we're not going anywhere. We're making a choice and we're making a covenant and we intend to see it through. And I think that unified us over everything because that foundation was built on Christ. And so if nothing else, we were unified in that end. And so we knew that even if we didn't have the answer now, we would later, as long as we were seeking the same end goal of staying unified in Christ.
Yeah, I like it. I think the way that we can disagree without damaging unity, and we've gotten better about this, we slow down now more than we did before.
Yeah.
And we try to think of how to honor Christ in it. And it's not just look at them, they're so wholesome and we are not. No, it's the reality, because especially the more time we spend in church around others, the more we realize that our boys are looking at how we do this, so that that's what they'll use as a model for building their own home.
Right.
The more slowing down and considering the other person and not necessarily wanting to be right, but what is right, helps us overcome that. And therefore, there's always a resolution that points us closer to Christ and to one another, rather than pulling apart and going somewhere else.
And let's not mistake unity for passiveness, because there is that temptation to avoid conflict by pulling back and, I just don't want to deal with it, so let them have their way. And we call that unity. That's not unity. And that will just build resentment later on. And so we don't want to confuse those things. Really when you're in unity. And so just, that is definitely a caution, is it's not just, well, they get to have their way all the time, and so then we don't fight. But really, you just always feel like someone's being the boss of you, and it creates a lot of resentment and issues.
Yeah, it's just sowing the seeds of discontent
at
that point. All right, how do we repair emotional distance?
Honestly, I think for us, it's really just taken a lot of relearning communication and having the time to do it. And that's hard, when you have kids, but I think we have found that time. And as the kids have gotten older, we've been able to tell them, they're more self-sufficient. So we can say, hey, we're having a conversation, give us our space. We'll, we'll come get you when we're done or whatever.
Which they usually love because they get to watch a show or play a game or do something that they like.
But I think it's been a lot of, you know, being clear with what we're feeling, trying not to dance around the issue.
Right.
Um, a lot of it is also listening. When we're both really emotional or upset, sometimes we just don't listen well. And so we've had to remind each other, I need you to try to really hear what I'm saying and how this decision bothered me, or we're feeling really distant. And, we've had those conversations
Right.
plenty. And so I think it's just a lot of that communication and really listening to the other person. Because I know, at least for me, oftentimes the distance is when I don't feel heard. And so if I know you're really hearing me, even if you don't agree with me or we don't agree, a lot of times I've said, I'm not necessarily looking for you to give me my way. I just need to know that you're hearing my point of view, and then we can go from there. But at least you've heard me out, and I know you were respecting my opinion and what I felt.
Right. So I think for me particularly, trying to bridge the distance when there's any, which I'm thankful that it seems like lately it's not so much distance as much as just slowing down. It's more on the idea of seeking to spend time together.
Mm-hmm.
And make it being again that word intentionality keeps coming up. Being able to think about, okay, I need to be able to focus at work, because if I focus at work, then I can focus more on this down the road. And that really helps. It helps to make the most of time, make the most of resources, make the most of my time in the office, and then make the most of my time going somewhere else. And when I get home, it's usually like, okay, I'm home. And yes, I may be tired or whatever, but I'm home. So it's been different, and it's gotten better. Any other thoughts? Okay. Here comes a fun one. How do we keep the romance alive? And the first question there is romance as a couple harder in ministry? Boy, this is a toss up.
I don't know. Yes and no. I mean, I think if you struggle with being romantic anyway, it's just hard, ministry or not. You have to be really intentional about it. I think ministry adds a complexity because it is very demanding of your time and often your emotions and your mental energy more than just physical energy. It's not, I went and, did labor, and so my body is tired, but my mind and my emotions aren't spent, right? Like, it's a whole different type of tired.
I can't feel anymore. I can't think anymore. I just leave me alone.
And so I think that's where the romance gets hard, because in that type of job, a lot of times romance does take mental and emotional energy. And then, when you're exhausted from doing that in ministry, it's harder sometimes to do that at home.
Sure.
Because you're just like, I'm pooped, right? Or with kids, I spend all of my emotional energy trying not to yell at them, or trying to manage their fights, or having fun, or whatever we're doing that day, help regulate them. And so sometimes when you get home, you may have had a great day, and I'm just like, dude, it was hard. We couldn't
Right.
even get through 2 math problems without breakdowns. Like, sometimes there's so days. So I don't know if it's as much ministry related, except for the fact that it's just more emotionally and mentally draining, in particular for you.
Well, I think it's for both of us. By the way, she homeschools, so you just know that. So yes, it's for both of us. I think what helps us, I don't think it's harder, because again, ministry with, like we've talked, with good support, good boundaries, good communication, not perfect, but good communication and being intentional, it's really not much harder than anyone else doing anything else. If you are thinking, man, people are looking at me in my marriage and it has to be, pitch perfect type of thing, then yeah, you're gonna add a complexity to it simply because you think you need to have a perfect marriage. Now, the Lord nowhere calls us to a perfect marriage. He
Right.
calls us to a sanctified marriage. And that means we have our proper roles. We try to do that. Are we going to be perfect on this side of eternity? No. But we do get to work on, how do we honor the other person? How can I show that I love you, that I care for you, that I want to
Right.
serve you? And so I think that helps to not make it less difficult, but it does help to make it more enduring, in the sense that we're not doing it for show for someone else. We're doing it because we love one another and we
Right.
want to be there for one another.
And sometimes we have to remember, when we talk about intimacy, we think, really private moments, but it's also being intentional with how you're connecting with each other. I think we used to take ourselves too seriously. We thought we couldn't be silly. We can be silly, and we're not going to be inappropriate,
Right.
obviously, but we can joke around with each other and be silly at home or anywhere else. We don't have to be so prim and proper, and that just
And show
stifles.
affection.
Right, that just
Yeah.
stifles fun, noticing each other. And that noticing sometimes is big, and it doesn't have to be a big thing that you notice, but just, hey, I noticed you. Hey, I missed you. Hey, how was your day? Or, the silly things that make each other laugh or that sort of stuff. That's part of that connection um, that keeps you close. It's not just we have our serious conversation and we're done.
Right. Which lends itself to the question, what intentional rhythms protect intimacy? So, for example, I would say for us, just from my perspective,
Yeah.
the date night. Now it's every 2 weeks we have a date night. I think we're gonna try to get a weekend away if we can, like every so many months. And of course, if we can get away for a week, that'd be great. Right now, it's not really that possible with the boys because they're young. But as they get older, as we get more established here, call this what it is, our home, then we should be able to break away and not feel so guilty to take time for our marriage because again the boys are going to see that and what we model for them is what they're going to say, oh, that's how dad shows mom that he loves her.
Right.
Oh, that's how mommy shows love for daddy, and that's what I should expect from my future wife, because in this channel we do know what a woman is and we do know what a marriage is. So that's more how that works. I think those rhythms where we look for the lulls or we create the lulls so that we can protect this relationship,
Mhm.
it helps us to project it out and to be in it for the long haul.
Yeah, I would say we are definitely more intentional about not being busy just to be busy. And I think that was something we really struggled with early on was, well, we had to be busy and doing something, or we weren't being productive, or we weren't accomplishing our goals or whatever. And I think we've learned, partially because we just get more tired, but also because we understand that the priority is not busy. The priority is each other. I know specifically for me, that's something I've really had to set boundaries in place for myself, because it can really cause you to feel neglected when I'm just all about, let me do XYZ, XYZ, and I never stop and just let me spend time with you, right? And so years ago, I started no more housework after the boys go to bed. Like, it's done. The day is done. There's the very rare occasion it has to do because of the next day. But generally, we already know that's going to happen. But by and large, the boys go to bed, the house is done. It doesn't matter what's left for the day. It's a done night. And we focus on spending those hours with the kids in bed with each other before we go to bed. And that's time for us to connect and do things on a daily level, talk about the day if we haven't had a chance already, talk about whatever, talk about the next day, connect on different things, chat about whatever we feel like, and just spend that time. But I think that's been the biggest thing for me is I have had to be really intentional, because it's so easy for me as a mom who primarily stays at home and homeschools and basically homesteads and does a lot of things on my own to help us as a family. It's easy to get really wrapped up in those tasks and
Right.
forget the relational side of everything.
Right. I like that. All right. How do we reconnect after draining seasons?
We take a nap.
A nap and some food. It's in the Bible. I read about a prophet named Elijah, and that's what the Lord recommended. But in all seriousness, it's a lot of the relationship rhythms that we have also have to do with our physical rhythms.
Right.
So when we are well rested, we take care of ourselves well, we thrive better because our bodies are functioning better. And so I think that's similar to our relationships, and it's correlating, right?
Hmm.
So taking care of ourselves, sometimes it just means, there's no ironing getting done because you need a break, or the dishes, you may ask for help, and that's okay to do. And it's okay for me to say, yeah, I'll take care of it and I'll go do it. Or I'll say, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it before I go to work tomorrow, types of things. Those things help us. It's the little things, the little gestures and acts of love and kindness, and even submission,
Hmm.
mutual submission, that allows us to help our marriage endure well into 10 years. I mean, we've had ups and downs. We've had deep grief, especially when we went through the transition back to San Antonio for the second time after we entered ministry in 2015. And I'm thankful to say that not once did leaving or cheating or doing anything that would compromise our marriage, our family, or the ministry entered my mind, simply because even through the difficulties, there was a high value for who you were. And there's that bedrock understanding that God gave you to me. And therefore, I need to take care of that. Those little decisions, I think it's what has made it to where we are not just tired of each other, just waiting for the other person to go to work or the other person to go to sleep so we can do whatever else, you know. I think it's been wonderful to see that.
Yeah. And I think we've also learned how to ask each other for help and admit when, hey, I'm just really exhausted. And I think initially that was really hard because there was a period of time where I know I felt like I was doing everything.
Right.
You know, I was working 2 jobs at one point because everything got so expensive and you were in the middle of residency and the stipend just wasn't that great. And it served a very good purpose. But there was a period where I know I felt like I was just doing so much. I could hear in my mind me, well, why doesn't he do this or why doesn't he do that? But I wouldn't say anything. I would just get angry at you. I wouldn't, yeah, I would
You
get
had a
annoyed.
fight and an argument with me in your head.
I certainly did, but then I'd just be grumpy all the time, right? Well, when we went to that first Family Life
I
conference,
remember.
it was the speaker, she said these things, and I was just like so convicted because I was like, that is everything in my head, like the tone, the thoughts, everything. And she, you know, she addressed all of that. And I mean, I broke down crying after because I'm like, I have just been so disrespectful. And that was kind of a wake up moment for me of, I have to communicate. If I'm not feeling heard or I really need help, I have to say something. You're not a mind reader. And
I wish.
I shouldn't expect you to be. And then the reverse is also true, you know? And so
Right.
we've had to learn to say, hey, look, you know, I'm really exhausted. It's been a stressful week at the house or a stressful week at the church. Can you help me out with these things? Or can we maybe not do some of the things this week we had planned on doing? Or and learning to hear each other for that and not get annoyed and give each other grace when they're going through those seasons. And I think that helps us get through those draining seasons easier because we know we have the support of the other person.
Right.
And even if we're kind of ghost blowing through it together, we both understand like this season right now really kind of sucks, but we're going to work through it together and pray and take it easy and focus on what's important.
I agree. That I think, yeah. Here's the final question for follow up is what small habits do you think matter most in order to keep that flame alive? What are some of those small things that add up over time?
Well, I mean, we keep coming back to intentionality, and that's so incredibly true. Like, I think if you're going to go through the work of talking about it, then you have to actually follow through with doing it, right?
Right.
Like if we have this conversation, I say, you know, it makes me feel really important when you help me out with dishes, right? Which you know helps me out a lot, right? Well, if you hear that, but then you never bother to wash a plate for 5 years, that doesn't tell me anything. It tells me you listen to shut me up and not really to hear where I need help or where that invests in me emotionally, right?
Right.
And the reverse is true. You tell me, hey, when you say this, it really feels disrespectful. And all I do is keep saying it. Well, obviously, that doesn't show a lot of love, right? And that's definitely going to kind of kill that intimacy. We don't want to engage in that anymore. So we'd rather just shut it off. So I think it's a lot of really hearing each other and being willing to say what you need, whatever that need is. If it's, I need help with the kids, I need help with the house. We need to talk about some more personal things, right? Like we need to have those conversations. We really hear each other and then we make intentional choices to work on them.
I like that. I think my recommendation would be present to your point, be an attentive, active listener, and communicate not to argue, but communicate to understand, which is where most of the problems, there's a number of communication books behind us. And so the biggest issue is people are not listening to hear the other person, they're listening to respond. And so if we actually can do better at that, to listen to engage and to understand, a lot of the problems go away. And that also helps not only with the verbal communication but also with the physical cues, the body language and things of that nature. Encourage all of my fellow brothers out there who are pastors and are engaged, married, have families. Slow down. I know it's exhausting, believe me, I know, but just pay attention to what's going on at home. Pay attention to when you walk in the door. If the dogs are losing it, the cats are running around, and the kids are screaming, and your wife is just about that close to having a mental breakdown, perhaps the best thing to do is just to take a deep breath and say, okay, honey, what can I do? And that's something that's learned. It's not something that you come with because none of us are born married.
And I think just don't bring other people into it. You know, like ladies, don't be sharing your dirty laundry with everybody. Like you need to deal with your husband first and have that conversation with him. And it's not everybody's business, not that you don't have your particular confidant, but you need to have wisdom in who that person is.
Yeah.
And really and truly, when it comes to those more intimate things in your marriage and connecting, if you really cannot resolve it on your own, then I think you seek some professional outside counsel and some of those to help you work through that better. Because what your best friend may say works for their marriage is not going to work for yours. And if you're sharing it with the wrong people, you're actually going to destroy everything you might be trying to do.
Right. Well, that's a great note to finish with. I am Carlos Garduño, and this is Disciple Makers to Live as Christ, and this is my wonderful, lovely wife, Catherine. Listen, we have another couple of episodes that will be coming for you, so stay tuned. And until then, take care.